Welcome to part 3 of doing the script for the UI Sampler Lab. In part 1 we did the buttons and set up our script to be hooked up and ready to go. Part 2 we did the slider. And in part 3 we're going to set up our inputs so that people can put in a number, put in another number, click this calculate button, and it'll display those two numbers added together in this test text. It's going to change the text to be whatever number that we have. So before we go over to the Visual Studio to do some programming, let's set up a couple things about these inputs first. So I'm going to click on the first input, and down here we do want to make sure that we're changing the content type to integer number. We don't want them to accidentally put something in like their name or like their address or just not a number. We can force them to only put in an integer number here. It'll also make sure that they don't put any decimal points in as well. So let's do that for the second one too. So we select it, and content type, we do want to change that to an integer number. It's a nice safety so that we can control the input with this. So let's go back to our code. And so the first thing that we do need to do is we do need to add some more public variables at the top. We need to have access to those input fields so that we can pull those numbers out of them. So I'm just going to add a public input field, and we'll call it first input because that's what it's called in Unity. Make it easy for ourselves. Then we'll make another one called second input. And I do like to save this and jump back over to Unity and make sure that these are hooked up in our UI controller. So they popped up over here, just so I don't forget about them. That's one of the big mistakes students make when they do their code. They think they're ready to go, they hit play, it doesn't work. Make sure you actually went ahead and filled these out, or else it's not going to know what to do. So I'm just going to click and drag first input into first input, and then second input into second input. And we'll save this, and now we can type in our code. So let's go back down here, and this is going to actually be a button click event, but we're still going to consider this to be like an input field event, just so if we need to go back and reference this, this is where we've been working with some input fields, so we can look at it. So what we need to do is we're going to have an event when this calculate button is clicked. So public void on calculate button click. And I noticed this in the other videos. I'm going to make multiple lines of code. If you want to simplify this because you have a good handle on programming into even probably just one line of code, that's fine. But I will step through everything that I'm doing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a couple of integer variables. I'm going to do one called first number. I'm also going to have one called second number. And then we'll have one also for total number. And then what we're going to do is first number is going to look at what's being stored in our input field and hold on to it. Same thing with the second number, it's going to look for the second input field and hold on to it. Then we'll add those numbers together and hold it in this total number variable. So we're going to type first number is equal to first input dot text, because if we go back over to Unity, where is that? That is right here, because by default we don't have anything in there. but if we go to the first input dot text, that's here. So by default it's blank. If you go back to the GUI first video, we put that first number in there as like the temporary one. It's in here. So that's not actually what's being the placeholder. That's not what's actually being stored in here. We want to see what did they put in. But notice that we are getting an error. And if we hover over that, we can see what it says: cannot implicitly convert type string to int. So this is the opposite problem we had when we were doing that random number into the test text, where we were trying to put an int into a string. Now we were trying to put a string into an int. So now we have to convert this from a string to an integer. And you'll be doing this probably a lot throughout the semester, so it'd be a good place to make a note to yourself on this is how you do this, because this is how you will always do this. In front of this, we're going to type int dot parse, and then we're going to put parentheses around this. So what this does is it's going to take whatever is here and parse it into an integer, and then we'll store it in this number. We have to do the same thing for the second number. We're going to say is equal to int dot parse second input dot text. And then we just have to find the total. So just simple algebra. Total number is equal to first number plus second number. And then we have to display that in our test text, which we've done before. Test text dot text is equal to total number dot toString. Because remember, just like we can't put a string into an integer, C# is really picky about putting an integer into a string, so we have to just do this dot toString to convert it over, and that's it. We have our calculate set up. Let's test it out, and let's hit play. Oh, sorry. It's not going to work. Why isn't it going to work? We didn't hook up our calculate button. So let's go ahead and hook that up. So kind of as review, select the button on click. We're going to add an event for on click, which is controlled by our UI controller. And we need to go to lab 2 and find that on calculate button click. So it's nice that we have our names named nicely, because we're having a lot of on events now for specific buttons. Now it'll work. So let's save, play. So 2 and 3, calculate is 5. Try number. We can even do like -8 and 3, -5. That's correct. We can also rotate it. We can scale it. We can reset it. It goes back to normal. I do want to make a note of something to think about. What happens if we forget to put a number in? We hit calculate. What do you think is going to happen? Well, let's see. So we hit calculate, and notice that nothing changed because we didn't have anything, but we did get something in our console where it gave us a warning that something tried to happen that wasn't supposed to happen. It's called an error. We're handling an exception. When you go on to more programming, you're going to learn more about this, because if we didn't grab this error, if it didn't catch this, the program would have crashed instead. This is an important part of programming we don't get to in this semester, but handling errors rather than crashing the program is important. And it's really interesting too. So something to look forward to if you go on with programming is learning, why did this happen? How do we set this up for ourselves so that we can make sure that we catch all of our potential exceptions that happen? Something else to kind of think about too, and it's not necessary for this one, but it is kind of a pain that when we type in numbers and hit calculate, these numbers still appear here. Like if we want to change them, we have to go back and alter them ourselves. you wouldn't expect that in a program like this. Like normally if you enter numbers and you do something, it should clear it out. But we're not too concerned about that with this lab. If you want to try to figure it out yourself, it's honestly not that hard. But something to think about. You will eventually learn how to do that. It's not too bad. So that's it for this one. We only have one more video after that, and it's doing the drop downs. So I'll see you in the next video.